Welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for this special joint event between the Schusterman Center for Jewish Studies at the University of Texas at Austin and the Schusterman Center for Judaic Israel Studies at the University of Oklahoma. My name is Jonathan Kaplan, and I'm the director of the Schusterman Center for Jewish Studies here in Austin and an associate professor of Hebrew Bible and Early Judaism. On behalf of my colleague, Professor Rona Seidelman, who directs our sister center at the University of Oklahoma, I would like to welcome you to today's panel, Israeli Society After October 7th, Art and Archives. Both of our centers owe their origins to the visionary philanthropic support of Charles and Lynn Schusterman and the Schusterman family philanthropies. Our centers have for many years now exchanged faculty for lectures and gathered faculty for dinners and lunches at conferences. With the advent of the pandemic and the turn to Zoom, we've been afforded new opportunities to collaborate on events, and hence our fourth annual joint webinar. I would like to thank the Schusterman Center's Administrative Associate, Emily Petrovsky, and the OU Schusterman Center's Administrative Assistant, Trice Hyman, for their work on today's event. Before I welcome Professor Seidelman to introduce our speakers for this afternoon, a few practical comments. Since this is a webinar, you will have to pose your questions, and we very much hope that you will engage in discussion in the Q&A box on your Teams screen. Please feel free to add your questions as you have them, but we will only be responding to questions you put in the Q&A box and only at the end of our panelists' presentations. Professor Seidelman and I will pose these questions to our panelists after their presentations. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Rona Seidelman, who is Associate Professor of History, is the incumbent of the Schusterman Chair of Israel Studies at the University of Oklahoma, and is the director of the Schusterman Center for Judaic and Israel Studies at OU. Her book, Under Quarantine, Immigrants and Disease at Israel's Gate, is a history of the Sha'ar HaAliyah camp, Israel's Ellis Island. Born and raised in Canada, Seidelman was educated at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and Ben Gurion University of the Negev. Please join me in welcoming Professor Seidelman.
Thank you so much, Professor Kaplan. It's a pleasure for me to be here today, and I want to thank Jonathan Kaplan and Emily Petrovsky and Trice Hyman for all their hard work in putting this panel together. And of course, thank you to our speakers and to everyone for being here today. On October 7th, 2023, so just over 1 year ago, thousands of Hamas members and other terrorists perpetrated a massacre in homes and communities in southern Israel, murdering around 1,200 people, the majority of whom were civilians. The terrorists took 251 hostages with them into Gaza. Today, over 100 hostages remain in Gaza. They include babies, women, and elderly men. We know from reports that they are being terribly abused. Adding to the horror of October 7th was the sheer brutality. The terrorists tortured, horrifically raped, mutilated, and decapitated their victims. They did this while filming themselves and celebrating their cruelty. It quickly became apparent that October 7th marked a turning point in the contemporary Jewish and contemporary Israeli experiences. As historian Aryeh Sapoznik has put it, I quote here, "There are moments of crisis in Jewish life that call out for renewed thinking and social, cultural, political transformation. October 7th is one such moment." In our panel today, we're honored to have two distinguished scholars who will speak to two aspects of this transformation in the fields of art and archives. I want to say preemptively that our focus today is on October 7th and not the broader war that continues to rage. Of course, there are forums and contexts in which we need to discuss these broader issues. But I think the easiest way for our North American audience to understand this is much like memorials for and events about 9/11. There is a time and place to discuss the devastation and the wars that followed 9/11. But there is also a much needed time and place to focus only on the American trauma. Before I introduce our speakers, I want to recognize that today in the United States, we are marking Indigenous Peoples Day. I hope our panel helps elucidate the complexity of identities, claims, and histories of Indigenous peoples around the world. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. Dr. Amitai Mendelson is Senior Curator and Head of the Israeli Art Department at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. He holds a BA and MA in Art History from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and a PhD from Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. His doctoral dissertation was adapted into the book, Behold the Man, Jesus in Israeli Art, which was published in both Hebrew and English. Among his numerous exhibitions and publications are Prophets and Visionaries, Reuven Rubin's Early Years, Real Time, Art in Israel from 1998 to 2008, Zoya Cherasky, Pravda, Raida Adon, Strangeness, and Sigalit Landau, The Burning Sea. Additionally, Dr. Mendelson has curated the permanent exhibition of Israeli art that is currently displayed at the Israel Museum. Dr. Raquel Euclides is the head of collections of the National Library of Israel. From 2010 to 2020, she was curator of the Islam and Middle East collection. Euclides is responsible for the overall development of all the library's collections and for digital, cultural, and educational initiatives based on the library's collections, as well as in partnership with other institutions. She is the chief editor of the book, 101 Treasures from the National Library of Israel, which came out in 2023. Since October 7th, Euclides has spearheaded Bearing Witness, the National Library of Israel's long-term project to collect, preserve, and open access to a wide array of documentation materials related to October 7th and its aftermath, both in Israel and abroad. A New York native, Euclides received her BA from Princeton and MA and PhD from Harvard University in 2006, all in comparative Islamic and Jewish studies. She also studied Jewish law in Jerusalem and New York, and Islamic law and Arabic in Egypt, Morocco, and the Netherlands. She has published and taught on a wide array of subjects related to Jewish intellectual history, Arab culture in Israeli society, Jewish and Islamic traditions, and the role of national libraries today. So with that, I will pass the microphone over to Professor Euclides, who joins us in Jerusalem.
Hello, thank you so much for hosting this webinar and for giving me an opportunity to share a little bit about our work. I'm going to go ahead and share a PowerPoint right now. So we start here. And what we are looking at is a house that was burned down in a kibbutz called Be'eri in the south of Israel, in what is called the Gaza border communities. You can see from the caption that this was taken a month after October 7th by a photographer named Frederick Brenner. Frederick Brenner is a famous photographer who takes photographs all over the world. He spends part of his time in Israel, a lot of his time in France and in other places. And he came to Israel. He actually left his professional camera at home and decided he needed to go down and see for himself what had happened. But he, being a photographer, he could not resist. And so these are actually photographs. This is one of the photographs from his cell phone. And what he captured here is the jarring contrast we see between the destruction of this home and the continuation of nature above and below. And so I think it's a very powerful entry point to this work. This work that we started on October 9th and continue to develop. And I want to share a little bit about the project. Now, I'll say at the outset that we at the National Library, and I'll tell a little bit about what the National Library is in a moment, libraries are used to doing things retroactively. I would even say that libraries are most comfortable waiting for the dust to settle and to see what's important. You know, whose archive is going to be meaningful for understanding a field or literature, or what documents are going to be important. When it came to October 7th, we realized very quickly that we couldn't wait for the dust to settle. We had to move very quickly. This project of how do you document in real time the catastrophe, the massacre, and then the beginning of the war, and then the extended period that we're in, is unprecedented, definitely in Israel, and with the exception, I think, of what's going on in Ukraine right now, it's unprecedented in general. It's very hard to get your hands around the scale of this project. And so I wanted to start by showing you just a few minutes of an animated film that was made about the experience of one particular woman. Her name was Maya Alpha, and she was a participant in this rave, this festival called Nova, and hundreds of participants from the Nova Festival were massacred in the early morning of October 7th. So this is a film that is in Hebrew, but you'll see captions in English at the bottom.
אז קוראים לי מאיה, אני בת 25, גרה בגואטמלה, באגם הטיטלן, ומלמדת אנשים לנשום. קיבלתי הצעה לעבוד בפסטיבל הנובה, שזה מסיבת טרנס. Getting paid to be me, dancing and loving Mother Earth. אני הייתי בדרך לשירותים והתחילו האזעקות. היה ממש טירוף, כאילו... ראיתי יריות ומחבלים על הכביש, ובערך 100 מטר מהמקום שראיתי את המחבלים, ראיתי 3 חבר'ה בצד הכביש. והם אמרו לי, תברחי, הרגע ברחנו משם, הם ריססו את כולם, הם הרגו את כולנו, תברחי, הם באים. והתחלנו 1.5 שעה של התברברויות, בלי דרך לצאת, לנסות להבין מה הדבר הכי נכון לכולנו לעשות כרגע. ירדנו מהכביש קצת לשטח, זה היה ממש בין הכביש לדרך עפר. כרגע לא היו מחבלים אצלנו, ואנחנו כל פעם במוד של טוב, כל רגע צה"ל מגיע או המשטרה מגיעים, ואנחנו רק צריכים להחזיק מעמד עכשיו, אז נצמדנו למחולות, ואני לפחות התפללתי.
अथ सप्तश्लोकी दुर्गा शिव उवाच देवी त्वं भक्तसुलभे सर्वकार्यविधायिनी कलौ हि कार्यसिद्ध्यर्थ उपायं ब्रूहि यत्नतः देव्योवाच
וממש סיימתי, כאילו שחררתי, פתחתי את העיניים, ואני שומעת על הוואק כבר והתבח אל יהוד מאחוריי. ואיך שאני יוצאת, אני שומעת יריות שורקות לי כאילו ליד הראש, כאילו מלא 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 יריות. הסתכלתי ימינה ישר אחרי המכולה וראיתי מין שיח קוצני שהיה בו כמו פתח קטן כזה. ופשוט קפצתי ראש לתוכו.
Even though it's an animated film, I think it captures it exemplifies the kinds of material that we are collecting in this project. We're getting the personal story of someone, but there's also an artistic aspect of the way in which he tells the story. For those of you who don't want to wait to see the rest of it, I'll just tell you that Maya stayed in that bush for another 6 hours, and she even, as part of this animated film, she shows an actual live footage from October 7th, where she's talking herself through this process, and it's very, very moving. And then eventually she was actually found by 4 Bedouin citizens of Israel, Bedouin Arab citizens of Israel, who rescued her. And this video just went up on our website among about 100 videos, both of oral testimonies and other kinds of videos that are part of this overall project. We are in a seismic event of Israeli history and more broadly of Jewish history. And the library as an institution for the collective memory, both of Israel and the Jewish people, we feel responsible to be able to help collect as much as possible so that we can remember. We have built an archive called Bearing Witness, and this is the URL for the website, and it's in Hebrew and English and will eventually be in Arabic as well. And we have 2 very clear goals. The first is to document every single thing that happened that day and its aftermath, to build the historical record. And we're all the time thinking about, what do we need to collect today for future generations to understand what happened? And the other aspect of this work is that we're not alone in this work. We have hundreds and hundreds of partners who are also collecting material. And our goal is to build one archive, so that for you, for our great-grandchildren, and for even 100 years from now, that there'll be one address where all this material about what happened on October 7th will be available and will be accessible. That's the goal. Those are the goals. Just a little bit about the National Library. We are a public institution in Israel, founded in 1892. And we have a few missions, actually. This is one of them in the National Library Law from 2007, where we are the institution of knowledge, heritage, and culture in general, and specifically in the areas of the Jewish people and Israel. And that is that we are both the library of what I would call a geographic region, and that is the Library of the State of Israel, including Jews and non-Jews in Israel, and all the different groups who live here. And we also are the library of an ethnic group that is the Jewish people worldwide, that is Jews both in Israel and all over the world. In addition, we are the premier research library in Israel, and so we have 2 world-class collections, one of Islam and Middle East, and this year we're celebrating 100 years of that collection, and a general humanities collection. Here are the representatives of our 5 collections, that is Judaic Israel, Islam, and Middle East. We have a national sound archive focusing on music, and a general humanities collection. So why are we doing this project? Because as the institution for the collective memory of both this country and of Jewish people worldwide, we feel responsible. And this is how we're working. First, we're collecting directly, both here in Israel and around the world. We're collecting a whole array of material. I'll highlight some examples in a few minutes. And we're offering a long-term home for hundreds and hundreds of initiatives that started already on October 7th. And it's something very distinctive about this work that I haven't seen in the past. And that is, regular people walked off their jobs on October 7th. They also understood that we are living through a critical moment of history, and they started to document and collect, whether it was stories of what happens to survivors or people who were killed, or what happened to communities, producing artwork or diaries, or even prayers and poems and music. And so the National Library is inviting all these different initiatives to deposit digital copies with the library so that they will be safe and stable for future generations. In addition to working at the grassroots, we are also working at a kind of meta level of we've created a consortium of the major institutions and initiatives, both here and around the world, to sit together and think, how can we build this one archive? How do we work out, there's kind of the nerdy side of it, the library side of how do we organize the materials so that if you were looking for what happened in Be'eri, that kibbutz I showed you at the beginning, that you will be able to get access to all of the material that was collected around this one place, Be'eri, or what happened to this woman, Maya. So if you want to find what happened to her, then you can get access to testimonies and diaries and photographs and songs and all this stuff around one person, one place, or even a time of day over the course of October 7th. There also are a lot of thorny ethical issues that we are working out. For example, there were many children who survived October 7th. If their parents say it's okay and they want to give an oral testimony, and they have, should we make that testimony available? What about the person, this kid who's 10 years old? In 10 years, do we go back to that person and ask them, is it okay to use their testimony now that they're a consenting adult, or do we not have to do that? That's just one example of a whole set of ethical issues that we're trying to work through, and we're actually writing an ethical code with all of our partners that will hopefully serve as best practices for how to do this work. And finally, we're working with the kibbutzim, these communities in the Gaza border and in the north, where we have about 90,000 people who've been displaced from the north because of fighting in the north, and to support them and the communities of their archives to help them tell their own stories. So a little bit about the kinds of material we're collecting. Number one, within Israel, we want to first collect all the material we can get our hands on about October 7th itself. So we, 3 weeks after October 7th, one of the civic initiatives handed us 200,000 videos from October 7th. Most of them were Hamas GoPro cameras. The Hamas operatives wore cameras as they moved into these communities, and they documented themselves what they did. There also are some videos by Israeli soldiers and others from eyewitnesses. And we have a lot of photographs as well from that day. We also have collected, and we are continuing to collect WhatsApp messages. WhatsApp being the instant messenger service that is very, very, very popular here in Israel. And the truth is that WhatsApp turns out to be the most authentic moment-to-moment documentation of what happened on October 7th. I want to show you an example. This is a translation, it was originally in Hebrew, of a conversation between Yaniv Hegi from Be'eri and his father-in-law and mother-in-law, Avromi and Era, from Kibbutz Be'eri. Here we are on October 7th at 9:33, where they're discovering that terrorists are walking in, and Yaniv is very, very concerned about his parents-in-law. And you can see here the dialogue. I'll just give you a minute to take a look at the back and forth about moment-to-moment understanding of what's happening. The terrorists have entered their home. They're in a safe room. Many homes in Israel have a safe room that's primarily designed against rocket attacks. And unfortunately, in many cases, these safe rooms did not protect people from Hamas operatives coming into their home and breaking down that door. In this case, I'll just turn it. You can continue to see what happened with Avromi and Era. So as you can see, WhatsApp provides us with that moment-to-moment documentation of what happened on October 7th. It turns out that, thank God, Avrami and Era survived. They remained in their safe room until 11 p.m. that night, and then Israeli soldiers finally got there and were able to get them out. Unfortunately, their neighbors did not stay in their safe rooms, and they were all murdered. Yaniv Hagi himself and his family also survived in Be'eri, and their neighbors were also murdered. On October 8th, this is what the house of Avrami and Era looks like. Yaniv Hagi, after this trauma, has dedicated the next few years of his life to building an organization called Memorial 710, and they are working with over 30 communities in the South to collect these WhatsApp messages in order to create a really authentic record of what happened. So that's material from October 7th. We're also collecting the ways in which people interpret and describe what happened on October 7th. There are about 30 different initiatives that are collecting oral testimonies. This is an example of an interview with Yusuf Ziedna. The Ziedna family, which is a Bedouin family in the South, suffered tremendously from October 7th. Several members of the family, about I think like 14 members of the family were killed, and another 7 were taken hostage. There's still a hostage of the Ziedna family that is in Gaza today, hopefully still alive. And he was one of these people who went and rescued participants of this Nova festival that we saw in the beginning of Maya, the video of this trans festival that turned into a nightmare. We're also collecting a tremendous amount of websites and social media, prayers, poetry, and music. In addition to collecting October 7th, we're also collecting in this broader war period. Rona asked that we focus more on the October 7th aspect of this work, and so I'll just leave this for you for a moment of all the different kinds of material that we're collecting. This is an example of a bomb shelter in the Nova Festival. Again, these bomb shelters were built to withstand rocket attacks, and if you can see, there are no doors. And so this bomb shelter did not protect people from terrorists that came in and murdered all the people inside. Since then, over the last year, you can see something that happened, almost a cultural phenomenon of these stickers to memorialize people who were killed. And these stickers you can see all over Israel. We are collecting these stickers, and people take them. You know, if God forbid, if your boyfriend or your girlfriend was killed. So I know personally of people who will put these stickers on their backs when they go, they leave the country to get away a little bit and go trekking in the Himalayas, and they want to bring their beloved with them, and so they put a sticker on their knapsack. And so we're collecting these stickers and this phenomenon. Another phenomenon here that we're collecting, which is we usually don't collect 3D items, but there are a lot of like paraphernalia that was produced. Unfortunately, this is Ori Danino, who was taken hostage on October 7th. And you see on the left different materials that the family had created to help get his face and name out as part of the public campaign to try to save the hostages. And unfortunately, he was one of 6 hostages that were killed about 6 weeks ago in Gaza. We have been collecting a tremendous amount of material on the web. 14 terabytes is some crazy amount of material, like 500 million pages. And we continue to collect and collect and collect, including material that was uploaded and websites that were built right after October 7th that are already taken down. So it turns out that a website is much, much less stable than other material. And so it's important to capture websites before they disappear. And we're collecting all kinds of material around the civic and political discourse in Israel, which has been a very contentious year. These are examples of anti-government, anti-war material you see in Hebrew and in Arabic. We're trying to collect the entire political, the entire religious, the entire cultural spectrum in Israel. And we're documenting October 7th globally. This was a very large rally outside the UN in New York of women protesting the UN's silence around what was becoming multiple evidence of systematic rape done by Hamas on October 7th. And we are putting a special emphasis on North American campuses. Here are two images from Colombia. And again, you see, for us, it's very important for the historical record that we collect the entire spectrum. There's the pro-Israel, there's the pro-Palestine, and everything in between is important to us. I've highlighted some of these challenges, and they continue to be with us. These challenges, how do you document in real time? How do you make sure that you're really creating a historical record that covers all the different aspects of this work when you don't have the luxury of doing it slowly and methodically? And we continue to hone our methods and try to make sure to fill in gaps, bringing in more staff to cover different perspectives. Here's just some examples of the kind of numbers we're talking about, and that's what I mean by this being an unprecedented project. We're talking about millions and millions of files, maybe even to the billions. We're going to get to billions of files of material, and probably we'll get to about 2,000 to 2,500 oral testimonies. And the final part of this proposal is to turn to you, and that is anyone who has come to this webinar is probably connected to the subject in some way. And we invite you to scan the QR code, and if you have a photograph or an op-ed or a video that you've taken or anything that you've written or collected, and you're willing to contribute to this archive, we very much invite you and appreciate your being part of this historic project. Thank you very much.
And now Amitai will join us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Warner, Jonathan, Emily, the staff that is helping to realize this important webinar. I'm going to show you actually quite different aspect of looking at this event, looking at this horrible day and its aftermath through a different lens. We're neighbors, Rachel and myself. The Israel Museum is situated right next to the National Library, right next to the Knesset, the Parliament House in Israel. And the Israel Museum is the house of art, the house of artifacts from prehistory until contemporary art. And what we want to do, my department, I'm in charge of the Israeli art department in the Israel Museum, is to give people experiences that are artistic, rather than archival. What we're looking for is to actually choose from very vast amount of artistic expressions that have been coming in from the 7th of October. A few projects that depict very strongly, in our opinion, this moment in time, and like it was mentioned, how important this moment is for us and how traumatic it is. So just a few words about the Israel Museum, situated, as I said, in Jerusalem. Houses more or less 500,000 artifacts from prehistory through Judaica and to contemporary art. Very large campus, one of the largest museums, obviously in the Middle East, but in the world, an encyclopedic museum. And I'm going to focus on a few projects that we had worked on in the last year since the 7th of October. So actually, the museum decided in the aftermath of the 7th of October, when the country was in a state of shock, this unexpected, brutal, and horrifying attack on Israel and especially the south of Israel near the Gaza Strip left us with no really known ways to deal with this pain and stress and anxiety that was felt all over the place. And as a museum, a place of tranquility, a place where people come to escape reality, a place where people come to look for beauty and aesthetics, we decided to dedicate a wall for for artworks that show and relate to this shocking event. So the first painting I want to show you is by Ziva Yalin. I'm going to show you a few of these projects and then go back to this specific painting by Ziva Yalin. And at the end of my presentation, I'll show you a specific exhibition that opened about 2 weeks ago by a photographer named Gaston Itzkovich. So the first project that we actually mounted right about 1 month after the 7th of October was Ziva Yalin's painting. It was actually a painting. I'll show you soon some details, but this painting was damaged in the attack. This is Rachel spoke about Kibbutz Be'eri, and Ziva Yalin was born in Kibbutz Be'eri, lived in Kibbutz Be'eri for her entire life, and painted its landscapes and surroundings. So this painting, just take a look at it for a moment. I'll get back to it, but this is a painting of one of the landscapes seen from the kibbutz. Actually, what you see in the horizon is looking west is Gaza. You can't really see the city, but you see the direction of the city. This is actually the road leading to the kibbutz, towards the looking west, looking to the Gaza Strip. The kibbutz is very close to the Gaza Strip, and this is where the terrorist actually came in. But the painting is earlier; it's from 2010, and I'll get to these paintings soon when I dive into this project. As I said, this wall that's in the center of our permanent display of Israeli art changes every few months. Every time our curators, not only myself, a curator for photography, and other curators see and pick a work of art that has a connection to the horrific events that happened, or to the aftermath of, and to the war that's going on now, we choose them and display them in the center of this exhibition. This is a piece by Nurit Gal, a diptych named Mamad, safe room. Rachel spoke about the safe rooms that were barged into by the terrorists in the kibbutzim. Almost well, not every, but a lot of apartments in Israel have these safe rooms, and you know that the bombings are happening daily now, so people are spending more and more time in these safe rooms, and these are like photographs taken from the safe rooms, very abstract, very kind of minimalistic, but they are actually taken from the safe room towards the outside of it. And the last project that we're exhibiting on this specific wall, which actually is exhibited at the moment, is a painting by Tzibi Geva, a very famous Israeli artist, a very senior Israeli artist who is known for his political works and for his engagement of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict through works that are at times very condensed, very kind of violent in their, but on the other hand, very anti-war, very for trying to find a solution. This work was actually painted as a response to the horrors of that Nova party that was mentioned in the last presentation, and it's called After the Party 2023. It's comprised of fragments of other works by the artist himself, violent brushstrokes, torn canvases, splattered paint, fused together to kind of make a sort of a chaos scene that cannot be mended. And as the artist said, the painting attempts to find a new means of creating and organizing meaning around a dark void, a desperate attempt to reorganize ourselves in a moment of turmoil. But back to Ziva Yalin. So I just want to go into this specific painting. Like I said, it was saved from her gallery. Ziva Yalin was also the head of the gallery, a Be'eri gallery, a very, very important kibbutz gallery that's been active since the late 80s. And she was the head of the gallery and an artist on her own right. She, during the beginning of 2000, the first decade of the 2000s, painted many works that were actually painted in red of the kibbutz and the surroundings. And red today we see as a sign of danger, the red alert that sounds every time there are missiles are targeted to wherever they're targeted to. But at the time when she painted these works, she described the red as a color of pure feeling and power, not necessarily depicting danger or anything of that sort. But when we came to 2023, and these paintings were in her studio that was attacked, and the studio was actually in the center of the kibbutz, in the midst of all these bullets and hand grenades that were thrown all over the place. The painting was damaged, not very, very badly. Luckily, you see the damage here. And actually, our decision in the museum was to bring the damaged painting as it is to the museum without repairing it. It would have been very simple, actually, to repair in our laboratories. It's not a big deal to add some paint, but we actually wanted this painting to be a sort of a reminder or a witness of this horror that happened, and the way it can even wound pieces of art. Obviously, killing so many people in the kibbutz, in the Be'eri kibbutz, 85 people were murdered and 25 were abducted to Gaza. So this is actually the gallery in the days that it was active in kibbutz Be'eri. This is the gallery right after the 7th of October. The gallery was burned to the ground. And this just another piece of memory back from older times. This is a Torah crown that was burned during the Holocaust, and actually it was exhibited in the museum without being repaired, without being mended. So again, this is a kind of a way of showing a material witness of a horror that happened, and the material lasted, but it is wounded. And in the same way, the painting by Ziva Yalin is a witness, is actually a witness of these horrors and the way art itself can be affected by it. So just a little bit about kibbutz. The kibbutz in Israel is a very important part of Israeli society. Kibbutzim were always known for being obviously a place of equality, a place where people wanted to live in an ideal society, starting from the early 20th century. And paintings of workers and paintings of landscapes were always part of this of the kibbutz life. Two of the most famous artists that worked in kibbutzim were Yochanan Simon, who depicted families and workers and the life of the kibbutz, and Ori Reisman, who especially depicted the beautiful, serene, tranquility, kind of peaceful landscapes around kibbutz Be'eri up north. So again, looking at these kind of and these paintings stood right near each other in the gallery. So looking at them together, we see a kind of a mirror of tranquility, and then a state of horror and a state of anxiety that I think Ziva Yalin's painting depicts, even though it was painted earlier, 10 years or 13 years before the events. So again, this is the display itself. You see Ori Reisman's painting on the background. You see a sculpture by Sigalit Landau. And I'm moving to the next project that the museum opened very, very recently, a exhibition by a young photographer named Gaston Itzkovich. And Gaston actually went back repeatedly to the Gaza envelope region, photographing since November 23 until recently, the field in which the Nova Party survivors fled to. And actually what he did, and it's quite horrifically beautiful, because what you're looking at is a beautiful landscape where the grass is starting to grow again after the catastrophe, but still still you see the wounds, the actual traces of the jeeps, of the tanks, of the army vehicles, of all of that horror that was happening there. And Itzkovich's photographic work since the beginning of his work, and he's in his late 40s, so this he's been working for about 20 years, and ever since I know him for about 20 years, I've always seen in his works a sort of way of looking at dramatic events and looking at sometimes groundbreaking and earth-shaking events without actually taking them directly, actually looking at what happened after the event, more or less the opposite of what you would call photographing the crucial moment. There's no crucial moment here. What's absent from the picture is more important in a way than what we see, because we don't see the horrors, we don't see the terrible images that have been flooding the net and have been flooding the TV since 7th of October. Rachel mentioned the endless videos that you can either watch or not watch. I choose sometimes or many times not to watch them, but people are totally they're all over the place. These images are all over the place. And what Gaston Itzkovich did was actually try to avoid looking straight at these horrors and actually looking at the traces, looking at the wounds, looking at what was left after the event actually finished. So here he photographed. He went back to maybe those same bushes that Rachel was talking about, where Maya hid for 6 hours, and other people tried to hide. Some of them were found and murdered, and others were survived. And he actually went back to these fields where dense branches and leaves were still there. But you actually, if you look closer, you see these traces of what happened, and it's actually more horrifying to see these small traces. And if you know what happened there, obviously you understand. So his gaze is almost tranquil, but it comprises and reveals and discloses the horror embedded inside of the landscape. In photographs of the road that was very, very close to the Gaza Strip, these are the roads that the terrorists drove through, burning cars, and you see actually the what was left of cars on the roadside. So this project looks at the events without actually kind of in a way would be the opposite of what you were showing before, the actual horrible events, even those that chilling WhatsApp dialogue. But here what we see is the aftermath, and what we see is how the landscape still holds those wounds, and how that still affects, and it will never go away. So here again, I'm just showing these two works together. They weren't displayed together, but just looking at how in a strange way these two works can relate. The road that Ziva Yalin painted back in 2010, showing that road that the terrorists later drove in, murdering many members of the Be'eri kibbutz and kidnapping people and causing this horrible event that started this terrible war that we're in from since then, and the field in which the Nova party happened, and how even though the nature is coming back and growing, and you know the season, the spring came, and grass started growing back again, but the wounds and the what's left in the landscape is still visible. So I think in all of these works of art that the Israel Museum decided to show, this is another painting by Ori Reisman. I mentioned earlier, a very famous kibbutz He worked in the kibbutz Kabri up in the north, depicting very beautiful, sensual landscapes. And again, looking at this in front or next to a painting that, a photograph that depicts the wounds in this beautiful landscape. It's not the same landscape, but again, it's an Israeli landscape. And going back to that first project that we spoke about, Ziva Yalin's red stain, and actually people came and looked at it, and it was a little bit like looking at a piece of at something that survived. And actually, when we were thinking about this painting and what it means to show painting that's damaged, what does that mean for a museum that never shows damaged works of art? The whole idea is always to fix works of art, to repair them, to make them as beautiful as possible, to get them back to the way they were when they were created. This is a big issue in art and people work. You know, we have laboratories that do that 24 hours a day, and actually here the decision was to bring this wounded painting into the museum. And the red obviously had a very big effect. For me, it was like a pool of blood in the center of this very beautiful white cube museum. And the effect of it was very, very powerful. I think that is what we can do as a museum. On the one hand, try to have people come in and be and take part of this, of the beauty, of the serenity that the museum can offer them. But on the other hand, not forget that the museum is also part of reality, and we have to, one of our missions is to project and to display works of art that have been either affected by or reflect the situation around us. And then you see this kind of very, very, I would say, not simple, but a fusion of beauty and of anxiety and of trauma. But in the end, I think there is hope, and I believe that art and the museum as the home of art can give people hope, because culture and art and music and literature, once if they're continuing, there's still hope, and hope for a peaceful future. And at this moment, I would also like to pray for the return of the hostages. There's still 101 hostages, Israeli hostages in Gaza, and hopefully for the end of this horrible war. So thank you for listening, and I'll stop my sharing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
If you hadn't had a chance to ask questions, to please take an opportunity to push the Q&A button at the top of your screen and enter your questions for our panelists. This is the way we are taking questions moving forward. I believe that we have one question so far related to our first presentation. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the vetting process used to verify the authenticity of submitted items and pieces and data to the National Library.
Thank you, and thank you, Marcos, for that question. So this is a question that we have been spending a lot of time thinking about, and it will continue to occupy our attention. I'll say at the outset that libraries traditionally don't vet material. We don't judge the contents. Libraries have many forgeries in them, and the study of forgeries is an academic field. And so in collecting this material, it's important for us to collect both authentic and non-authentic material. We are actually going out of our way to collect fake material. Now the question is, to what degree should the library be responsible to identify what is authentic and what is fake? To what degree do we have the capacity to do that? The truth is, Marcos, we're still in process on this. I'll tell you where we've gotten to so far. What we've decided to do so far is that if we know something is fake, or we have significant concerns that something is fake, then we will write that in the record, that we believe there's a good reason to doubt the authenticity of this material. At this point, we are not planning to do extensive checking of the material, but we are in conversation with high-tech companies about whether there are tools available that we can run through the material that we've collected as a way of doing an additional due diligence on this material. But this is a question that actually has always been a problem in libraries. But it is particularly an issue today because of deep fakes and because so much of the material we're collecting is digital. I'll just end with one example. There's not a week that goes by that someone doesn't write to us saying that they have unearthed an ancient Jewish manuscript. It is surprisingly almost always from the Arab or Muslim world, and it is 100% of the time thus far fake, 100% of the time. And it's such an interesting phenomenon. And the forgeries are actually not, sorry, just got dark in here for a second. The forgeries are not actually that good, but it continues on a weekly basis. And so the issue of forgeries are not just unique to this project. It's a question libraries chew on a regular basis. I hope I've given enough of an indication of where we're heading right now.
I just want to follow up with that kind of a follow-up question for further clarification, because I work in antiquity, so the prevalence of forgeries is related very much to the price of the forgeries, and I wonder if that might be also some other indicator for the National Library in taking in and collecting all of this material, that there isn't at this stage, I would say, a profit motive necessarily, but are you seeing other types of motives at work for forging documents related to October 7th or materials related to October 7th?
So I want to add one more piece of this before I answer your question, and that is another way that we are working to be transparent about the authenticity of materials is that on everything that you will see in our collection, there is provenance. That is, we're indicating where this material came from. And so because we are, as I mentioned, we're offering this long-term home, we're doing this aggregating work. And so a person can be able to judge the authenticity of the material based on what was the source of the material. Okay. To your question, Jonathan, it's not a price issue right now. It's about what's motivating people to produce or collect material. And as we know that very soon after October 7th, even October 8th, there were those who started denying that October 7th happened and claiming that the videos that were shown were deep fakes themselves. Now, it turns out that Hamas uploaded the videos that we have to their own Telegram accounts on October 7th, because for the first X hours, might be like 12 hours, they were celebrating their actions and they thought the world would celebrate with them. When they saw that the world was not celebrating with them, they started taking them down. Now, luckily, there were people in Israel who were paying attention immediately and downloaded this material. It wasn't us, actually, it was individuals who were very quick and downloaded this material. And so that's why we have this material. There are videos that are being produced for propaganda purposes on all sides. I think that's the real concern here. And that's the real forgeries of fake editing or adding information that's not correct. That's one category. Another category is we are collecting a lot of testimonials of eyewitnesses. Now, in any case of providing testimony, the question of to what degree is the person telling an authentic story, right? That historians are going to need to evaluate. And that's true about any set of oral testimonies. And so the way you can evaluate it, and maybe one thing we're trying to do in this archive, is by collecting so much material from so many different sources that you can do corroborating. That is, the story of Yusuf Ziadna doesn't just appear as an oral testimony. It's also in the newspaper. It's also in the the descriptions by people who were saved by him And so that's a way to corroborate. And so that's work that any researcher is going to need to do for this material, like for any material.
Thank you. That is immensely helpful and clarifying, particularly highlighting the ways in which the archive itself mutually reinforces and the evidence helps build a composite picture for events for historians looking at it. Dr. Seidelman, did you have a question?
I did. I thought that I would just take advantage of while other people are maybe putting down their questions in the Q&A. I had, first of all, thank you both for those really, really fascinating and important presentations. So I had a question, I think, for both of you, and then maybe 2 follow-up questions specifically for Dr. Euclides. So I guess I'm just interested in the moment that you went from this very personal experience of October 7th to this professional experience, like understanding that this was something that you were going to need to respond to within each of your fields of work is something that I find very interesting and I think could be useful for us to think about. And then maybe I'll just ask my 2 other questions and then you guys can both respond. And for Raquel, you had talked about the ethical issues that you encounter with this work that I think is so interesting and important in writing this ethical code. But I wondered also about sort of the maybe psychological or emotional issues of the people who are dealing with all of this material that is so difficult, and whether that was something that other archivists and libraries have sort of a set of best practices to follow. And then the final question is just about the practical aspect of when I know that the archives in Israel, I think, is it a 30-year, usually it's 30 years before they open to the public. Is that, you were directing us to some of the material that's already available, or how is that going to work? So now I'll mute myself. Thank you.
Amitai, maybe why don't you go first and then I'll answer the other questions. I'm just going to turn on the light, excuse me.
So the question about, I think your question was about what was the reaction after the initial shock, and how each of our institutions looked at this event and what to do with it, right? That was the question. So am I correct? So for me, I'll just tell my personal side of it. I mean, for me, right after the events, first of all, we were closed for quite a long time. The museum was shut down. We had to, like every, I think obviously the National Library did that as well. All of our very precious and most highly estimated items were taken down to storage. They had to be protected. The first thing that was taken actually on the 7th of October itself are the famous Dead Sea Scrolls. They were actually on the day itself when still the country, no one knew what was happening. There were no real reports from one of the big problems and horrible things that happened on the 7th of October was a lack of knowledge of what was happening on that day. The army was totally, it was a huge, it was one of those moments in history where everyone was shocked, including people who were supposed to act right away. So what happened on that very same day was that the museum curators who were in charge of the Dead Sea Scrolls came and took the Dead Sea Scrolls, our most important findings, down to the storage. And actually I came a day later with other curators taking down other works of art, but that's just on the more, I would say, like the technical side of it, to protect our works, which is maybe our most important task, protecting our artistic and cultural heritage. But on the different aspect of your question, it took me some time personally to understand what the Department of Israeli Art can do in this kind of situation. Once the museum opened, this took a few weeks, the museum opened, I guess things were starting to get kind of more back to tracks. People were going back to work. People were going back to their life. It was very difficult because the shock of the day was unbelievably huge in the whole country. and also the anxiety. We didn't know what was going to happen, and I think we're kind of still in that state of shock. A lot of people describe the 7th of October as continuing till today. But obviously life goes on, and what I thought, my initial idea was to go and visit the survivors. And actually I knew about the Be'eri Gallery, and I took my car on one of the Saturdays and I went down to visit them in the Dead Sea, one of the hotels where the evacuees of the Be'eri were all taken to a hotel. The whole kibbutz was evacuated. As you know, I don't know if all the audience knows, but tens of thousands of Israelis were evacuated from their homes in the south and in the north. I think almost 100,000 people are displaced inside of Israel. Not speaking of obviously displaced Palestinians, but these were the survivors of Be'eri. I went to visit the artist Ziva, and then she just told me about these paintings. So that the whole thing happened very kind of on a personal level. It wasn't like the kind of a systematic and archival work that the library does. This was more, I would say, specific, and this one painting that worked in the exhibition. So it's all about choosing what I thought was like the right painting to do this, to give this kind of creative reaction that we wanted to show. So that was my experience of the aftermath of the 7th of October.
On October 7th, I was in synagogue for much of the first half of the day. There were 12 sirens in Jerusalem, and we went in and out of the safe rooms. I had no idea what was happening. On that day, like Amitai described, my colleagues who were online and paying attention, they went to the library and they took out 200 items from our new exhibition. The National Library of Israel built a gorgeous new building, and we were supposed to open on October 17th. Everything was ready to go on October 6th. We had been planning those opening events for 2 years. And on October 7th, we cleared everything out and brought them many floors down. And then on October 8th, we canceled all of those parties and all of those events. And then we pivoted to getting the building open for the public. You asked at the personal level. I say that on October 7th, I had no idea what was going on. I don't remember October 8th. I have one memory that my son and I went to try to donate blood, but I was shell-shocked. On October 9th, I started talking to colleagues that we need to get to work. And we started by downloading material from the internet. I can't say that anyone was terribly productive in those first days. It was excruciatingly difficult to focus. I lost a cousin on October 7th, and I had two people who I believe friends who were kidnapped, who were taken hostage. We only found out 6 weeks later that Vivian Silver had been killed on the day of October 7th, and she never made it out of her home. And the other person, Hirsch Goldberg Poland, who became quite famous, he lasted almost a year, and then he and Ori Danino, who I mentioned, they were killed in tunnels in Gaza. And so it was very, very personal. We had a friend of mine, his sister and her husband were murdered, a colleague, her sister and her husband and 3 little children were murdered. And so it was very, very personal. That being said, we were able to start getting to work in those first few days, and very quickly we learned about this emerging field, and we got involved in trying to figure out how we can help guide this field. There were those in the library who thought that the library staff should go out into the South and interview people, and that's when I think, Rona, my professional side kicked in, and I said, I understand that instinct, but we are not professionals in oral history collection, and that's not a good use of our time. And I'm a big believer that everyone should bring to the table what they do well. And so we developed a wonderful partnership with a group of 6 oral historians, and they built something called the Forum for Wartime Documentation. And they, together with the library, we started producing best practices. How do you do documentation? What about all the ethical and the legal issues involved? You have to get permissions, et cetera. And they actually built this amazing collaborative WhatsApp group that exists till today of, it became, I think there are like 500 people on that list, on that WhatsApp at this point, and an entire field was developed. And so it was through these collaborative work that I was able to make that shift between the personal and the political. But I have to admit, until today, it's still very, very personal. And I think it's true across the board. Look, we've been talking primarily about October 7th and how it's shaped and affected Israelis, but I do want to own and mention that this has been a devastation for the Palestinian people. And there is tremendous suffering going on among Palestinians in Gaza and in Israel. Palestinian citizens of Israel have many family members. Entire families have been wiped out. So I want to honor the memory of the Israelis who were killed and in brutal, horrifying ways, but it doesn't mean that others haven't suffered. To your questions, the psychological issues, it's something that came up very quickly once we got this collection of 200,000 videos of horror, and we knew that we didn't want to put anyone to sit down and catalog 200,000 videos of massacres. And it became clear to us from a very early stage that we're going to have to introduce all sorts of AI tools in order to deal with the scale of materials and also the difficulty of the materials. So we've been doing pilots with high-tech companies and AI to see what can be done. And the purpose of the AI is to watch the video, produce a synopsis, and to give us an indication of what a person would see, and also to do facial recognition of who can be identified, what are places that can be identified. And so we can get the basic information on a video by someone without someone watching it. That's the goal. In addition, we've gotten volunteers from around the world who have offered to come and look at that material. There's a woman who's a criminologist who specializes in sex crimes, and she called and said, I can sit there and I can watch this material. And so there are these heroic individuals who are willing to do this work. And the final piece of this is that we also early on set up therapy for our staff, and there have been a few who have asked for it, and that's going to be ongoing. We're aware that no one is going to be forced to do this work by any stretch. People who are willing to do this work, that they can pace themselves. Opening the archive. So from the outset, we said that this is a 5-year project, and we knew that the collecting, that's the main focus of our work for the last year, and we'll continue into the second year. That's almost the easy side of the work. The hard part of the work is figuring out both legally and morally what is appropriate to open up. Every material that we get, you'll see anyone who goes into that online form that I showed at the end, the QR code, will see that any material we get, we want to be paired with information about the owner of the material, the creator of the material, and whether that person has the authority to release the material or the will. And there's always an option of giving it to us and letting it be available only within the building, or to open it up only for research and not for commercial use, which is most everyone, and we recommend that. But we also have the ability to close a material for X years. And so, for example, the WhatsApp material, this Memorial 710 organization, they have produced a whole set of online release forms for people to give their permission, either just to archive it or to open access. But when you have a group like the Be'eri Kibbutz has a WhatsApp group, and there are hundreds of people on that list. And so they're slowly working through how to get permission. Be'eri is a bad example because they've decided they're not sharing, but other other communities are working with this organization, and they're slowly working through the releases of hundreds of people in order to get this material available. That being said, we have decided to be very conservative about this material. And so for the first year, we are collecting and not enabling access at all. And we will revisit it in about 6 months. And then we've said from year 2 to 10, assuming that's the default, we will make it available for researchers in the building. And only after year 10, we will make it available outside the building. And that's only for WhatsApps that the owner has signed a release form. So we're being very, very careful. And the reason is that we don't know, and this is one of the ethical issues, people who say yes or no under trauma, we want to create the space for them to change their minds. And the issue about opening access to this online material, digital material, as I think we all know intuitively, moves around very easily, right? And so imagine, again, you're that 10-year-old kid who survived October 7th. You gave testimony. Your WhatsApp messages have been collected. 10, 15 years later, you Google your name, or a prospective employer Googles your name, and this material comes up, right? And so we're aware that there are so many different aspects to this work that we don't see the full picture, so we're going to move very slowly. All that being said, Israel has certain rules about copyright and intellectual property, and that is 70 years from the death of the creator, the author, and 50 years for photographs. So when I say we're building for the historical record, I really mean that we're building for the historic record. We worked very hard to find 100 items that we could open access to for the anniversary of October 7th. I can keep talking, but I want to give you a chance to ask other questions.
I think we had one question come in through the Q&A. This is from Hadass Cohen. Thank you for a fascinating talk. The question is for both presenters. What are other artistic forms of documentation or documentation have you encountered, and who created them? Survivors, families directly affected by October 7th, or the general public? Lastly, are there works created by the Palestinian Arab Israeli Society, given that they were also victims of October 7th?
Amitai?
I'm trying to understand if this is a question to Rachel or to myself, because artistic reactions, as in painting, sculpture, video works, and photography, we've been trying to. I've been seeing a lot. I mean, a lot of artists, including many people that I know, many artists that I know, young artists, senior artists. In some way, a lot of artists have reacted to these events, but actually, in a way, sort of maybe echoing in a way what Rachel was talking about. It will take time, and I think the big question for me was how can art actually deal with such a horror? You know, how can, and this is not a question only about the 7th of October. I mean, looking back at history, art has always tried to look at reality, and art dealt, from ancient time, prehistoric times, maybe, dealt with death and loss, and there's a huge discussion about how art reacted to the Holocaust, and how artists, what artistic output there was that related. How can you actually look at the horror and do something creative with it, and how does that actually help or change reality? And these are huge questions, and I think for me as a curator in the Israel Museum, those were very, I find myself occupied with these questions, because in the end we want to show art that makes a difference, and is something that people can use as a means to help their experience of this, especially now in this in this period. But art is not always only a comfort chair or something to look at and to only enjoy. Art is also difficult. Art can also tackle with big psychological questions, with trauma. But in the end, I think, it's a very complex discussion. And for me, it's about choosing, because I think the difference between a museum and an archive would be actually that for us, it's about choosing. We're looking at hundreds or thousands of works of art, but in the end, we have to choose one or two. And we've been doing this year. It's very difficult because a lot of the works are very emotional. A lot of the works are very expressive. A lot of the works are very much about the experience of the artist specific. And I've seen works that artists made in Be'eri and other kibbutzim and other people, and about Israeli, the question also related to Israeli Arabs. The Israeli Arab artists artist community is like a lot of Israeli artists in this time. A lot of Arab artists, or a lot of Arabs in Israel at this time, they're in a way in a very bad situation, because they're between, like Rachel said, between the fact that they're Arabs and have, some of them have families in the Gaza, and the situation in Gaza is horrific. It's horrific. It's not something we can not talk about. It's something that we can't not look at. Morally, I believe this in a moral way, not without any connection to art. We have to look at the situation in Gaza and also in Lebanon. We have to look at the suffering of these people. It's many people that have nothing to do with the war, nothing to do with the Hamas, and they're suffering and dying in the hundreds and in tens of thousands. So that's one thing. But I think the Arab artists in Israel are in a way numb, I would say, because the people I've been talking to it's very difficult for them to show their art. It's very difficult for them to come and say, this is what we're doing now, because they're very scared that Israelis will look at them as anti-Israel. Everything has gotten very, very radical these days. I mean, if 1 year and a week ago, we would be looking at Arab artists in one way, not me personally, but I think a lot of people would now look at them in a suspicious eye, and I think the Arab artists understand that or feel that. This isn't in any way a something that our institution is doing. Not at all. We're showing Arab artists and Palestinian artists at the moment in the Israel Museum, but I think that that the artists themselves feel very nervous, feel very unrestful at this time, and they're looking for ways to. They're hoping this will pass. They're hoping that things will be more normal, and that they could be again like they've always like they've been, and it's been going. It's been more and more of that. There are more and more Arab, Israeli, or Palestinian Israeli artists that are getting a lot of visibility these days. I curated an exhibition of Raida Adon, a very, very interesting and important Palestinian Israeli artist. The whole exhibition was about her idea of how Jews and Arabs in this region can live together, and it looks like an ideal fantasy at this point in time. But this was the whole concept of her exhibition that we exhibited 2 years ago in the museum. But I think Arabs are in a very, very rough time, Israeli Arab artists, because of this stress and because their fear of showing their art. But for me personally, and for the Israel Museum, and obviously for the National Library, it's very important for us to keep them as part of our society and to display their works and to archive their whatever is happening in their society, which is part of the Israeli society. I hope that was understandable.
I'm glad Amitai went first to talk about the visual arts at the almost, I don't want to say at the lower level, but more in terms of different diverse artistic forms. What we've seen is a lot more material. There's a lot of graphic art that has been created, some for we have this word hasbara, which is kind of between diplomacy and propaganda. It has a funny, fuzzy meaning. And so a lot of graphic artists have stepped into that role. But there's also artists that are trying to express the trauma. The art school B'Tzalel did a whole project of producing beautiful kind of graphic art around images of the South before October 7th. And there's an organization called Design Duty. In a moment, I can share my screen and show you a few examples. And it's kind of, art, let's say with a lowercase a is a way to explain what it is. And in addition, we're seeing a huge outpouring of poetry and music around October 7th. And many different ways of using media to express what we see. This animated film I showed you is part of a whole series of animated films that have been produced since October 7th. And so there are many different ways of that people, primarily these are scholars and they are artists, meaning if there's an artist who uses a certain medium, then they produce in that medium to express their experience of October 7th. And in some cases, there are survivors who are producing this work. Most survivors, I think, are, as Amitai was describing, are still in the shock and trauma of what they're producing. And hopefully over the next few years, we'll see more of that. In terms of work by Palestinian citizens of Israel, so we too are seeing the less material being published because of this atmosphere that Amitai described. In addition to everything Amitai said, right after October 7th, there was crackdowns on Arab citizens in Israel who expressed a whole range of public displays on social media, whether there were very few celebrating Hamas, but there were some who produced messages that could be interpreted a certain way, and hundreds of people were actually arrested. They were arrested for a short period of time. There are few who continued to be in custody, but most people were arrested and let go. But that put a very strong chilling effect on the Arab community, and the self-censorship continues till today. And we see it because we have tried in many different ways to document and collect the experience of the Arab community in Israel from this period. And we've talked to a number of people who have said that there's material that's produced and shared very privately, and maybe I'll share it with you as long as you promise. This goes to what you were saying, Rona, about closing it for 50 years. There's tremendous concern that this material could ended up in jail, even if it's just criticism of the government or, in normal times, what would be perfectly acceptable democratic discourse. And so that's a candid assessment of what we're seeing. I will say that among the many documentation initiatives, there's a recognition of the fact that there were a number of Arab victims of October 7th, and there were a number of heroes of October 7th who were Arabs. Yusuf Ziadna was one of the ones. And so there's a lot of recognition, especially for the Bedouin community, who were the first deaths from October 7th from missiles, and making sure that their voices are being included at the documentary level. As Amitai said, I think we haven't yet really seen artistic responses so far.
That just to add something to what Rachel was saying, Israel is still in a state of war. It's a declared state of war. So we're in the longest war actually ever. I think the independence war was shorter than this war, and it's going on, and all these terrible after these terrible what happens in war. Well, examples like what Rachel was talking about, censorship, people being very, very, very tense, very full of anxiety. racist. All the bad things come out in these times, unfortunately, and we're in it. So I think it's a matter of time. Hopefully things will change, and we can see more clearly the effects, the artistic outcomes of this period. And there have been times like that in history, and great art sometimes happens in these times, but we never know. We can know. I think it will take a little bit more time for us to know that.
I think maybe I can join Jonathan now in just thanking our speakers, and as we bring this to an end. This was really phenomenal, and I know that we learned so much, and so grateful to you for your time and speaking to us today. I know it's very late in Israel and Jerusalem where you both are, and we're very grateful to you. Jonathan, if you have something, do you also want to say just in conclusion?
Yes, I just want to thank both of you for very moving presentations, which both brought us back to the reality of October 7th, but also the legacy and your important work to document and preserve and help ensure continued reflection upon this important event for many generations to come. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the audience who has stayed loyal for an hour and a half.
Thank you for listening.
And, may the next time we meet will be after this war is over and we are shifting to rehabilitation. I will perhaps say at the end that what we have found, and I'm sure Amitai, you've seen this as well in parallel in your work, that this process of collecting to one place often gives people a sense of relief. And there's a therapeutic aspect of this work that if we do our work well and people believe that all of this material is safely preserved, is stable, and will be accessible going forward, it creates space in people's chests to be able to breathe a little more and to be able to focus their energies on how do you restore and how do you rebuild this country.
I agree, and I think both of our institutions, the National Library and the Israel Museum, are all about preserving culture, and they're all about keeping that stable and keeping that safe. We talked about the physical side of it, taking down rare and precious items to safety. And that's what we're about. We're about preserving culture and hopefully bringing that to our future generations, our children. And that's what I'm hoping for a better future and for peace. Amen.